Welcome back to another episode of the Experts in Fire podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vennard, and with me today is Randy Mowry. Today's episode is the first part of a two-part series on gas fire pit burners, stainless steel versus brass. Let's get into it. Hey, Randy, how you doing today, brother?
I am doing awesome, Mike. How are you today? Are we ready to burn up the mic this morning?
Let's burn up the mic. I love it. That's Randy's quote. He's going to use it forever. Let's burn up the mic, baby. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. The sun is out here in beautiful, sunny Michigan. Don't start buying your plane tickets yet, folks. But the nice days are coming here, and I'm pretty excited about it, man. Looks like we're getting to the other side of this thing called winter.
This is true. Oh, man. I was out at one of our co-workers' houses not too long ago, helping him out with a little project. And when I pulled up into his driveway, which is only about 45 minutes north of where I'm at, there was about 20 inches of snow in his entire yard. So definitely glad to see a lot of that melt.
All right, Randy. So today we are going to talk about gas fire pit burners. I mean, it's the time of year to start gearing up for people who want fire pits, and that is going to involve some type of pan, burner, ignition. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about inside of this section. We sell a ton of pans and burners really all year round. There are folks doing this, but the spring is typically the big rush for this type of stuff. So we just wanted to give our listeners an opportunity to get a little bit of an education on what's available out there, and then what can I choose from, what would be best for my scenario that I'm working on. And then, of course, we always want to tell our listeners, use a gas professional anytime you're working with gas in your home. I understand the thought of, man, I'm going to save some bucks here. But there's an opportunity for bad things to happen if something's done wrong. So please make sure you utilize our pros out there. That's why they go through the education they go through, and the learning that they do is to make sure that they can keep you, your family safe. So I want to make sure we start with that. But we've broken this down into kind of two sections here. Stainless steel tube burners, and we'll discuss those, and then we're going to talk about some of the newer stuff in the market out there, and that's brass and stainless, but it's really those jet powered burners that are on the market right now that we handle a lot of those as well. So let's dive into stainless tube burners. Randy, I know you sell a bunch of them.
Oh, we do a lot of them, and it's whether it's you're just traditional, your stock sizes that are out there, or the, customization. I guess with stainless steel, maybe just starting, just simply with some pros and cons of the stainless steel. And stainless steel, obviously the pros are more economically priced overall than anything, than like a brass burner. They have multiple standard shapes that are available with the stainless steel. And then I guess a couple of the cons would be with the stainless steel burners, they're going to need to be replaced more frequently throughout time. And then they're just smaller flames on average with your most common stainless steel burners versus the brass.
Yeah, let's break that down a little, though, real fast. When you say more economical, I think it's fair to point out, because there is a distinction line inside of economical, and this is the one area you need to be aware that it's available. Usually your lower cost ones have been imported. And I want to point that out because I know quite a few of our manufacturers, they build them right here in the U.S. So
they do.
Some people are going to see, well, how come this one is stainless and this one's stainless? Well, one is probably imported and one was probably made right here in the U.S. So that's one of the things one of the distinction lines between, price points. Either way, they're both going to be more economical than what we're going to talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking off of that, Mike, with you mentioned like the imports, one of the two stainless steels really ideally you want to look at and use is going to be a 304L stainless steel or a 316L. The main difference there is the 316L is typically used in more of the coastal areas. A lot of companies allocate it as a marine grade stainless steel for those coastal areas. A little bit less corrosion on that 316L versus the 304. But 304 is probably the most commonly used stainless steel across the board. And with some of the imported versions, we're not really sure what you might be getting exactly in that product. The other thing to notice is, and I believe this is more commonly known with some of the imports, is looking at the holes that are in the burner. Is it a punched hole process or is it a drilled hole process?
Okay, let's think about that for a second. A punched hole is just taking that tube and pushing some type of sharp object and creating the hole itself, which is going to push the steel down inside of the tube some.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, think of just using a center punch with a piece of flat steel, and you're basically scribing a mark into that steel for one purpose or another, whether you need to drill a hole, and it leaves a divot, a deviation in that steel. Well, with a punched hole burner, it's going to do the same type of thing. So not only do we have the hole that the gas is going to come through for the flame, but we're going to have this slight deviation in there. So the challenge with that is that deviation is going to hold moisture slash water. And that is going to be one of your first areas of corrosion on a punch type of burner, because it is going to constantly hold some type of water and moisture in there. And it's going to eventually rust those holes out much quicker than any type of drilled hole process. What's nice about that is it's drilled. There's no divot that holds the water. And also you have, because it has almost like not a burr that you're going to, run across your finger and cut your finger, but that drilled hole actually helps waste away water off around that hole so that it actually not getting in the hole itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got a hole that was pushed down, and the water that is hitting that burner for whatever reason, rain or whatever, is going to be invited into that hole because of just the natural landscape of it being pushed in, versus a drilled hole, that steel is being pushed up and out and you're removing steel, so it's actually going to act as a barrier. I mean, we are talking not quite microscopic level, but pretty dang close.
Yeah, it's not something that you're gonna see necessarily. It's just the nature of it, a drilled hole in it. Much better process. And then what you'll find on a lot of the burners, that the companies that actually do the drilled hole systems on their burners, they also create what's called a raised hub. And that hub is the center port. So that's like where your main gas supply comes in. And it's raised in a fashion that if any water gets in there,
Right.
it has an underside like weep hole that water will actually just drain out of that burner so that it doesn't get into the main gas line. So they're taking the extra steps to help in that corrosion process and eliminate as much as possible.
Let's talk to that, Randy, because it's definitely something inside of that stainless arena. You can buy imported, so less expensive to the US made. You've got punched holes versus drilled holes, but ultimately, the discussion is going to turn to how long is this going to last? And really what you're talking about right now are the elements, particularly water, and how water wears on that particular stainless steel tube burner. So you mentioned that drilled hole is going to help keep the water out. A raised hub. The hub is the very central point. So if you think of stainless burners, they're round. And they have different levels of round tubes, right, from a smaller to a larger. And you're talking that hub is the central point where the main gas line feeds up, and then the gas disperses throughout all of the tubes from there. So they raise that up in the air a little higher. Do you know how much higher?
No, I don't know exactly what the height of it is. I just know that it is raised. It's allowing the water to pass out and get away, basically escape from getting down into the gas line itself, or if somebody has like an electronic ignition, getting down into the control box is what it's helping do.
So water damage is something that you're going to need to be aware of regardless of what you're putting outside, right? And these are a couple ways to educate yourself to know what is out there, what's available out there, so that I don't have to be concerned with that. I also know we have a manufacturer that we utilize who offers a lifetime warranty on their stainless product.
One of the few, not very many companies do, just because of the nature of the stainless steel, that it is going to oxidize, it's going to rust. I know this firsthand. I actually had a stainless steel burner in one of my fire pits. So I still have the fire pit and had to replace the burner. We're in Michigan. I want to say that maybe it was 5 years or so on that stainless steel burner, maybe a little bit less than that. But it did ultimately had to replace that stainless steel burner.
And you know what? Let's talk to that. Is a stainless steel burner, depending on the size, is going to, I mean, what's a price range for a stainless steel burner in your mind, Randy? Let's use yours, for example.
So my burner was a 24-inch burner, and I think just for the burner alone, it was in the neighborhood of about $125.
Well, let's do some quick math on that, because I know our pros that are listening out there, they're going to get asked the question from their clients, and what we try to do is help educate them so you can head off any questions, right? Educate your clients so that they're aware of what to expect, and set that expectation for the client, versus wait for them to ask the question in 2 years or something of that nature. So $125, and you said after 5 years you had to replace it? Okay, so we'll just do a little math. That's $25 a year for using that high capacity burner. I'm goofy like that. I don't know. Some people might think it's smart, but even when I buy appliances, I'll break it down to a monthly cost and look at, how much do I really want to spend on something. So you can see at $125 every 5 years to sit around the fire and enjoy, that's not bad. That's not a bad cost. But the important part is to know that at some point, this is a replaceable, and it is an item that's going to need to be replaced sometime down the road. Is that accurate, Randy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You have fire-related questions, and we have answers. You can email us your questions at podcast@woodlanddirect.com or give us a call at 586-221-3638. We would love to be able to answer them right here on the Experts in Fire podcast. And we could kind of use this to transition into the pros and cons of the brass burners, or what we'll call the jet burner section. That air fuel mixer, if you're going to use propane, is extremely important. What happens if I don't use it, Randy?
So the nature of propane itself, the gas is heavier than air. So what happens is that air pools up underneath, and without any type of air fuel mixer in there, you're not going to end up getting any flame out of that without the air fuel mixer, because that's how propane works. We've got to be able to mix that with air. The safety part of that is that gas is just going to build up underneath the fire pit itself. And when that happens, ultimately that flame hits that, it's like a little mini bomb. Think of anybody that's barbecue grilled and their flame goes out and they have gas build up in their grill head, and they go to hit that igniter button and it's like woof. You have that to the extreme on a propane fire pit without having the proper air fuel mixer on that burner.
So basically you're pulling the air in and mixing it with the propane so that, number one, it's a part of the ignition. It needs it as a part of the fuel.
It needs it as part of the fuel to burn, correct.
Okay, so the flame, if you're going to get flame off of it, and I'm just really going a little deeper for our listeners out there, you need the oxygen to blend with it as it's going up and through, so that when it comes out the holes and it hits ignition, it has that oxygen mixed into it already. If you don't, and you're just pushing out pure propane, then that propane's going to come out and just kind of drop. So it needs that oxygen level. Inside, and let's transition here. We might have gotten a little too deep for you out there. If you have some more questions off of that, please don't hesitate to give us a call or shoot us a line at our listed ways of getting a hold of us. Randy, if we're talking about air mixers, and we're going to jump from and they're probably the most common, just a stainless steel tube burner. They come in lots of shapes and sizes. And we move over into this land of the jet burners. Brass burners is really how it started. Now we have multiple steel types, but it all revolves around a jet, some kind of port that is coming off of the main tube so that it's pushing that out. What are some of the pros and cons for those? And we'll also get into whether or not you need an air mixer.
The pros on the brass right out of the gate, it's a lifetime warranty on the brass units. They tend to use less gas. In the air mixers, like we were just talking about, are actually built into the vertical port on the very top of it, eliminating that air mixer below. Because, what the air mixer is doing, just touching on the air mixer itself, propane is a liquid fuel. So what the air mixer is basically doing, it's diluting the propane, converting it into an aerosol as it comes out of the top of the burner. So that's what those air holes are doing. Now, when we go to a brass system, what we're doing is each port on a brass burner actually has a built-in air mixer to it. So it's doing that on the top surface versus below the surface. So it's eliminating the need for an air mixer below on a burner. It's putting everything vertical on the very top surface. And what that is also doing is it's essentially shooting. Now we're like a Venturi effect almost. We're shooting the flame out of these vertical ports. So with that being said, that tends to give us a taller, fuller flame. The con, typically, when we're talking about a brass burner, is they're more expensive versus the more economical stainless steel burners. And in some cases, depending on the size, that cost could be, a couple times higher. However, in relation to the two as well, you might get a little bit higher BTU rating on a brass burner versus a stainless steel if we're working within the same diameter. But because of the unique and patented designs that these companies have, on average, they're probably using maybe 30% less fuel based on the design and this Venturi effect of how they're shooting this gas out.
Let's talk to that, Randy, because we get a lot of questions from folks. Some folks are just looking to add a fire feature. They just want something, fairly economical that they can put in place, and we'll direct them toward, your stainless steel tube burner. But then you have folks. I remember one guy called in and he said, Mike, he was in Texas. Of course, everything's bigger in Texas, right? But he says, Mike, I want something that can be seen from the space station. I loved it. And of course, I directed him toward, these brass burners or these jet burners. Ultimately, you still have to, if you want to be seen from space, ladies and gentlemen, you can't just connect to a regular household gas line
Right.
and expect to see it from space. So there are, again, you need to talk to a gas professional and see if you can even supply that type of gas. You know what, Randy, I want you to talk to the difference in flame height, because that's really what we're talking about. The pressure that's coming out of one of those ports versus the pressure that's coming out of one of those tubes that's got a hole pressed or drilled into it is completely different. So can you talk to the difference between height of the flame between the two, stainless and brass?
Absolutely. So, stainless steel burners is just going to be a natural flow. The gas is just naturally flowing through your stainless steel burners. On average, I don't know, we'll say, on average with stainless steel burners, and this is providing that the gas lines are the appropriate size for the BTU that is the burner. So if you have a 180,000 BTU burner, the gas line has to be X based on the run of the gas line from the house. So we want to make sure that everything is correct for the BTU. So presuming that we have the correct gas pressure based on the burner size that we're using, you might see somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe like 6 to 8 inches of flame on just maybe standard round stainless steel burners. Where in the same scenario with a brass burner that has this forced fuel and air mixture coming out of the ports, you can easily see, like for mine's about 14 inches, where I was getting 6 to 8 before. I'm getting 14 to 16 out currently. And this is a propane version. Because of the specific air to gas ratio at each individual port, that combustion is helping produce a higher and taller flame, a fuller, more realistic flame I would say it's probably some of, most realistic that you can get that resembles like a wood burning fire. That's some of the main significance that has come about with creating these brass burners. Is we're providing more flame presentation for folks. In essence, with more flame that you have out there, it's going to help generate more heat around that fire pit, of course, as well.
I love the direction we're going here. We're really getting into the why. Why would I choose a brass burner over, a typical stainless steel burner? And you're really hitting on a lot of the whys right now. Number one is warranty. Number two, just the height of the flame, the presentation of the flame itself. There are a lot of positives, but you're going to pay for those positives because these need to be built. They're built differently. You think of a stainless tube burner, it's usually a continuous run of some sort with maybe a weld at the seams, and the holes are drilled into it. And of course, they have to have straight pipes that are connecting those circles to keep them all into one side and so it can feed gas to them all. But pretty standard is going to be some type of weld for those tubes so that they can all be put together. Versus a brass setup, it's really measurements, cut the pipe, thread the pipe, put the next fitting on, measurements, cut the pipe, thread the pipe, put the next. That's really how they're building these brass burners as well. So there is more man hours in it. There's a lot more thought that goes into it. They thread a lot of holes for those jets so that they can screw them in. Some manufacturers actually weld them in. It's well worth the cost. And I'm just trying to help everybody understand some of the why behind why would I pay more for it? Well, it's more labor intensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then brass, keeping in mind, these are solid brass pieces. They're not brass plated. So brass itself is corrosion resistant. It will not rust. So this eliminates the need for any replacement, and that's why they offer a lifetime warranty. The other thing with brass, and we're generically calling them jets, the vertical style setup. So these ports, what makes it really nice is when I do 8-foot diameter, I want what's called a progressive from the exterior to the interior flame presentation. So we have like a step up where I have maybe a little bit smaller flame on the outside, but then I want to build up to a much larger flame to the inside. Well, we can manipulate these ports. So just to give an example is, I think one of my recent ones, it was about a 10-foot that I did last year. And we built several rows of 5,000 BTU ports and then I merged our way into 10,000 BTU ports as we got towards the middle of this burner. And so that changes your flame presentation. So it almost like, we'll call it, like lack of better terms, like a Christmas tree effect. We're starting out wide and then we're gradually going to this high peak in the middle of flame. So there's a little bit we can work with there and customizing these burners a little bit more when it comes to the brass as well.
I don't think people really realize how much science goes into these types of things, just in the fact that you were able to speak to the difference between a punched hole and a drilled hole and how water is impacted with that. One of the cons to brass burners is you do have to leave the tips of those ports or those jets exposed so that they can mix the air. And it can look like that flame is just shooting 12 inches in one direction. And it sounds like that's why you had built that one with the 5,000 BTU and 10,000 BTU flames to get more of a wood-burning flame look.
Yeah, just so we could get to the aesthetics on it. It was just a lava rock base. So, when you're just doing a simple media base, you're absolutely correct. You have those tips need to be exposed for that mixture there, so we can't cover those up on the very top. One way for folks to eliminate that, if they really don't want to see the brass port, is they can always TP up a set of gas logs around that burner, and that eliminates that visual effect of people seeing those brass ports if they just don't want to see anything. So that's one way to kind of get rid of that part of it. But overall, they still do a great job. It's minimal as far as the seeing that part of it.
This conversation could go so many ways. When it comes to media, you have so many options. You got lava rock, you've got glass, you've got crushed glass, you've got smooth glass, you can use cannonballs, you can use log sets, you can use, I shouldn't say now, they've always had steel gas logs available. I say gas logs, but steel logs that you can put right in the flames. Really unique and neat things out there. If you want more traditional look of, like you said, logs that are kind of teepeed for outdoors, you can do that. They have logs that you can kind of stack. They have beech wood, driftwood looking logs. So if you're down in a coastal area and you just want that sweet driftwood look, which is probably my favorite.
Yeah, they got some really nice driftwood logs, and in the media is acceptable across the board, whether it's a stainless steel or a brass burner. You can use any of these medias that you're talking about in either application. It comes down to really the aesthetics and what's going to fit with somebody's project the best. If I'm doing a cabin out in the middle of the woods, typically fiberglass is not an option that I would recommend or offer to somebody. Don't want to get beat up over the phone by doing that to somebody, versus like someone that's doing maybe a linear contemporary style burner where fiberglass looks better versus logs, that type of thing. So there's definitely a ton of media options that can serve the stainless steel or the brass. Definitely a lot of options in stainless steel and brass.
So lots of options out there. You know what, Randy? I think we need to have another conversation, because one thing we haven't touched is shapes and sizes, and then get into the customizability. Is that a word?
Not sure if that's a word, but it's definitely an episode that we should go into, because there is a lot to offer, which is a whole nother recording for us.
Absolutely. So you know what, we're gonna say goodbye for now from this one, and talking through just educating on gas burners and stainless versus brass and the options that are out there. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to talk to us directly, absolutely, we have multiple ways you can get a hold of us. We want to thank everybody for listening. We really appreciate the support, and if there's anything you want to hear about as we get into the spring here, we'd love to talk to you about it. Randy, thanks so much for being here, brother. I really appreciate you, man.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always a great time.
And we'll see you next time while Randy's burning up the mic. Join us next week for the second part of the series on gas fire pit burners, shapes, and sizes. We'll see you then.